Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending which time zone you're in. I'm Ian Tabor or at Mintinet, and this is my car hacking talk from an IVI in a box to a car in a box, where I go into a car hack I did on one of my vehicles previously and how I then built a car in a box. First things first, who am I? You could say I'm the ultimate car hacker. I built this kit car 15 years ago now. It's based on a mid-90s rear-wheel drive Ford running gear and has a 2004 Ford Focus engine at the front. It's got quite a bit of power, doesn't need too much, but not a lot of weight. Goes pretty quick. It's complete opposite of the vehicle I hacked, and it only has 3 ECUs, and 2 of those I built myself. The first of which is a Mega Squirt ECU, which does the ignition and the spark for the engine. The second is the little box, as you can see in the top right hand corner. It's a Arduino Mega based GPS data logger, which talks over the CAN bus to the Mega Squirt, gets real-time data from the vehicle to see what's happening, so I can play with the settings, etc. at a later time. Little disclaimer, car hacking is done at your own risk. If you break your car, and you will if you try too hard, please don't blame me. I've done it once. I made my gearbox disappear, but managed to get it back by disconnecting the battery for a long period of time. However, did have to take 3.5 weeks to learn how to change gear again. So onto my car hacking history. In 2018, I did a talk at DC 4420, B-Sides Rookie Track, and DEF CON 26 Car Hacking Village. We're browsing from a car, what's the worst that can happen? That went into more details about this hack, the disclosure process, the fun that I had with the manufacturer. I will be touching on it slightly, but not going into as much detail. 2018, I was invited by BugCrowd to a live car hacking event, one of 12 researchers there. I then returned again in 2019, being one of 20 researchers. That was interesting. Come on to that in a bit. Last year at DEF CON, I was part of a car hacking panel with Cybergibbons and Spectres. That was quite interesting. General chat about how we got into it, what we found, what things we've done. Also in 2019, I went to the Auto Isaac event in Texas for HackerOne as part of a car hacking vulnerability disclosure policy panel to try and explain that car hackers are actually good for the automotive industry. It's quite an interesting time meeting the manufacturers, finding out what their issues and things are. For my sins now, I also run the car hacking village in the UK and help out with the team at DEF CON. I will be bringing my car in a box virtually to DEF CON this year. So last year I did about 12 or 13 events, I think it was. This year there was many more planned, but however coronavirus has broken it. Done a couple of virtual ones, including this one. I have been asked to go to almost every continent in the world with my car in a box. India, Australia, Brazil, DEF CON, most of Europe, Egypt. Logistically, I'd love to, but it's an absolute pain to try and get it anywhere. So not going to be happening anytime soon unless I can drive there. So onto the car in question. In 2015, I purchased this DS5 1955 limited edition. It had all the bells and whistles, top of the range, all the toys, including a 7-inch touchscreen in the middle of the dashboard, which you could surf the internet on if you tethered to your mobile phone using either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Great idea, wonderful. Why you'd want to do it, I don't know. The UI was absolutely useless. But you could tether through to get internet access. So at the time, I was doing lots of long journeys up and down the country for work. But being bored one evening, I decided to have a little sniff around, run Mmap while connected to my phone, and managed to find 4 ports open. 23 111-3333 and 20,000. My day job at the time was network architect, so everyone knows what 23 does. So telnet, straight into the head unit, no credentials requested, no nothing, full access to the file system, which included the USB socket in the middle of the dashboard, so you could copy data off. Having a look around the file system, there are some folders with some SQLite databases, both system and user ones. Most of the system ones contained settings and things for the vehicle. The user ones, however, there was 3 interesting files which contained your navigation history, your phone book, and your telephone history. And you could also get out all of the details of every phone that's ever been connected to the head unit. So at the time when I first found it out, I didn't really do much with it because didn't really want to break my car. It's my daily driver. But in 2017, I decided to sell it. So I had a week to find any major vulnerability, any other vulnerabilities I could. So reading up on the VxWorks command reference guide, I found out you could map an FTP server to a file path and extricate the data over FTP, so you wouldn't even have to be inside the vehicle to hack the vehicle. So at this point, I wrote up my findings, contacted the manufacturer, PSA, to which their comment was, well, it's up to the user to secure their Wi-Fi, which is not really right because I'm not saying the Wi-Fi isn't secure, I'm saying the actual device is insecure by having telnet available. So little scenario posed to the people at Citroen. Your mobile phone's dead, you have no internet access, so you pull into McDonald's, tether your car onto McDonald's Wi-Fi. That then gives you internet access. However, at the same time, someone on the same Wi-Fi can then run Nmap, find out where, find that port 23 open, go through your file system, find out where you are, and potentially rob you. And they're like, ooh, that's a bad idea. So I know what the fix will be. It will be disable the Wi-Fi. Problem with that is the actual exploit is also available over the Bluetooth stack using personal area network, so that didn't really work, but not really a problem. So sold the vehicle, but then I was told by someone at one of the conferences I went to that port 20,000 was actually direct access to the CAN bus using DMP3, which is in the industrial control system protocol. Still haven't found out how to generate those packets correctly, but I'm working on it slowly. So what I did was purchase the parts to try and get it working off of the car. So I went to the scrapyard, purchased the head unit, which definitely had the Wi-Fi chipset because there's a little sticker on the top that says Wi-Fi. And I purchased the screen, went to the bloke in the scrapyard and said, can I have the wires with it? Because I don't have them in the car I'm putting it in. And they were like, well, if you're not putting it in the original car, I'll give you the wires, but you've not got no warranty. So basically, there you go. There's head unit for about 300 quid. But however, if you just plug a head unit into 12 volts these days, most of them don't even have buttons on to turn it on, and you don't get anything out of it. What you need to do is purchase most of those things on the floor there. Had to purchase the ignition key, ignition barrel, body control module, engine ECU because they're all coded together. Steering switches, they can come off any vehicle. Instrument cluster, again, can come off any vehicle. And the wiring loom, and get myself a 12 volt-ish power supply. Plug it all in, managed to get the head unit working outside of the car. However, that's not really portable, so what I did was do a bit of reverse engineering using some CAN bus software, CAN utils on a Raspberry Pi, connected up to the CAN bus, listened to the messages coming through, worked out that there was 5 messages required to basically start the head unit up without the rest of the car being there. So I made myself this. In the little bottom left hand corner there, there's a little blue box which has an Arduino Nano and a CAN transceiver. That then generates those 5 messages so you can run the head unit outside of the car in the case that is shown there. When I actually got the head unit working, even though it said Wi-Fi on the outside of the head unit, the Wi-Fi had already been disabled, but the Bluetooth personal area network was still available. I've recently managed to find a Russian website that tells you how to re-enable your Wi-Fi. As you can see there, there's a Bluetooth symbol for Bluetooth tethering, Wi-Fi symbol for Wi-Fi tethering. That's quite handy. It's much easier to actually do the attack via Wi-Fi than it is via Bluetooth, because Bluetooth just takes so long to enable. The only saving grace on the head unit regarding the exploit is that it isn't automatically enabled every time you get in the vehicle. You have to manually go in and turn on either Bluetooth tethering or Wi-Fi tethering. So at this point, I was probably in it for about £500 for the head unit and the wiring loom and the other bits you saw previously. And then parked it for a bit because I had DEF CON and things to go to. However, I wanted to make a car on a bench. The inspiration for my car on a bench is here. This is Grim Cyber's 3PO, which has all the ECUs from a 2012 Ford Focus in the US. It's probably identical to the 2012 Focus in the UK, but the steering wheel's on the wrong side, but whatever. However, this doesn't actually think it's a fully working car. It has all the ECUs, you can play with the data going around, you can make it do things by injecting data as you wish. However, it doesn't actually think it's a working car. So at the time, I then went off to the bug bash. Me and a couple of other people found a major vulnerability in the vehicle we were testing. We then got a payout of a share of a payout of a 5-figure sum between the three of us, which gave me a bit of spare cash to actually build the rest of my car on the box, or in this case, car on the floor. So I had to then purchase all these other extra bits. So on the left, you've got a steering rack with its associated ECU, throttle body, main fuse box, which also has an ECU in it. Engine ECU I already had. ABS ECU for the brakes, throttle pedal, because it's an electronic throttle pedal, body control module I already had. There were some other switches and things that I need to purchase to get the lights and stuff working. Some of the lights, switch cluster already had, instrument cluster, yes, already had. I also had to buy all the sensors and all the electronic components that are attached to the engine, apart from the big things like alternator and starter motor, because they're just motors and they're triggered by 3 wires. Don't really need to emulate one of them. So at that point, I then had a car on the floor, which is a bit messy, and yeah, great. It's not the easiest thing to get out, set up, and play around with. So I then had to see if I could get rid of some of this wiring onto wiring looms. So this is the wiring diagram for my kit car's ECU. It's a Megasquirt 3.0. It has a DB37, of which 26 wires are connected, I believe, 6 of those of which are ground. It's not the most complex engine in the world. It uses batch injection, wasted spark ignition, single fuel pump, crank sensor, throttle position sensor, single oxygen sensor, coolant temperature and intake temperature. And that's quite a bit of wiring, especially when you have to build it from scratch. However, on the Peugeot 208 that I had, there's the wiring diagram for the main engine ECU in the middle, and the associated parts that are actually needed to make that work. The main engine ECU has 2 53-way connectors. One goes off to the engine compartment, one goes off back to the body, and there's another 32-way connector which also goes off to the body. So that's 138 possible pins that could actually be used. Quite a few of them are, most of them are actually. This is because the engine in question is a 3-cylinder with sequential injection, coil on plug, dual O2 sensor, dual variable valve timing, including dual cam sensors. It also had air temperature, water temperature, manifold air pressure sensor, electronic throttle body, and electronic pedal. This is just the single wiring diagram for that one function. Every wiring diagram for every function is different. There is no wiring diagram that says Here is everything on that vehicle. It's an absolute pain when you're trying to build something with all the bits of the wiring diagram. But so we've got the engine ECU wired up, but we need to make the engine think it's actually rotating. So what you need to do is you need to spoof the crank and cam signals. The way you do that is the crank sensor on this particular petrol engine uses what they call a 60-1 pattern, in which there's 59 holes drilled in the back of the flywheel. There is a magnetic sensor pointing at it, and as the 59 holes go around, it makes a waveform, and the 60th hole is a space that it knows where it is, and that can give its waveform for the crankshaft. The camshafts themselves, there are 2 camshafts in this vehicle, both have variable valve timing. One of the cam sensors is here, the other cam sensor is over here, and there is a profile on the end that also again has a sensor pointed at it and creates a waveform just so that the engine knows where it is in the cycle, depending on where it wants to put the variable valve timing. So I had to find a bit of hardware and or software that could do this. Arduino comes to the rescue, bit of software called ArduStim. Here is a trace from a protocol analyzer. Top row is the crank sensor. Second row is the inlet sensor, and the third one is the exhaust sensor. As you can see, the crank sensor repeats twice for every 1 turn of the cam. That's because it's a 4-stroke engine and you've got the suck, squeeze, crank, blow. Down in the bottom corner is a PCB I had built after I'd originally built it, just so that if anyone else wants to try and build a car in a box, they can then generate these signals quite easily. There is space on that PCB for both surface mount and through-hole versions of the transistors and resistors. There's also a third spot for one of the transistors to be a very large one for slightly heavier duty transistor load. So that was the crank and cam sensor sorted. Some of the other sensors on the vehicle you can get away with just a potentiometer, fuel gauge being one, water temperature being another. You can also use something to create a vacuum on the manifold air pressure sensor. I tried to use a syringe, a large syringe attached to a pipe. Doesn't always work, but most of the time it gives you enough of an it will actually fool the sensor enough to think it's doing it. There are some other things you need to fool when building a car in a box. Things like indicators, you have to have the correct load for the indicators, otherwise they'll flash fast. On to the next sensor that had to be simulated in some way, shape or form. Most cars nowadays have Lambda sensors, which are used to check how the fuel is burnt within the engine. There's one pre and post the catalytic converter. They basically create a AC waveform on a DC offset, which basically says I'm going lean, I'm going rich, I'm going lean, I'm going rich. This is the circuit. It uses a 555 timer, and those values of resistors and capacitors shown. There are 2 of these inside my car in a box, one for the pre-cat, one for the post-cat. Lambda sensor also has a separate part that you also need to fool, in that there are heater circuits within the sensors. They draw about 1 amp all the time, so you need a suitably sized and high wattage resistor to be able to fool the Lambda heater sensor, Lambda sensor heater even, to think the vehicle is working, otherwise you'll throw an error message. The last of the sensors that was an absolute pain to fool. I originally tried to do it electronically by trying to monitor the waveform when spinning the disc in front of a sensor using a drill. Wasn't fast enough and I couldn't work it out. But what I have done here is there is a motor in the middle there attached to a disc. Around that disc is the reluctor wheel, which would normally be on your axle on the vehicle, and there are 4 sensors around that reluctor wheel, one for each of the 4 corners of the car. That then tells the ABS ECU that the wheels are rotating. What you need to then do is pulse using that Arduino Nano and here and the RG stim with a larger transistor. You can then pulse width modulate that motor to speed up or slow down depending on how fast or slow you want the engine to think it's the wheels to think it's going around. That was a challenge, but it's now works quite well. Doesn't fail too often. Sometimes it ends up going at 170 odd mile an hour, which is just a bit weird, but oops, whatever. Onto the car in the box itself. Here is a map of the CAN networks inside the car, and there are 4 CAN buses. The red and orange one on the left hand side is what you would call your main CAN bus, the one that you can actually normally access in the vehicle. There is your OBD2 port on the bottom left hand corner. That bus then goes to the body control module, the ABS ESP ECU, power steering, engine ECU, and the main fuse box. That is a high-speed bus at 500k. There are 2 other low-speed buses at 125k. There's the yellow and green one, which goes from the body control module, which acts as a gateway to the steering control ECU, so the one where all your switches for your lights and the indicators and things. The airbag ECU, which I haven't put in the car in the box because I really don't want someone to try and set an airbag off at a conference and me having to fill a form in. And then again, there is an additional OBD2 port on that bus. So you can see what's going on the bus or inject messages if you want to make it do something nefarious. The second blue and darker blue low speed bus comes from the body control module and is for the instrument cluster and the matrix within the instrument cluster, which gives you your GPS commands and things, and the IVI. Again, I've got an additional OBD2 port on this bus too for reasons for monitoring and or injecting data. Finally, there is a 4th bus, which is a high-speed bus between the IVI screen and the head unit itself, which I believe is for the touch panel, so it can see what's going on. If it works, might as well. So what does the car in the box look like? My car in the box is called PD0, P for Peugeot, D0 is 208 in hex, which is what the vehicle has come from. There is the main box at the bottom there. The box in the middle at the top is a record box for 12-inch records, which is where the ABS simulator is. And then there is the case for the IVI in a box. This all sort of fits in the back of my car quite well. I used to take up the whole boot and all the back seat on my previous vehicle. Not fun when going to a conference and you have to try and stick around and leave your car exposed. But yes. Some of you are probably wondering how much this has actually cost me to build. The IVI in a box was probably a total of about £500. The rest of the components probably cost me about another £1,500. So there's probably about £2,000 in it. I could have probably done it a bit cheaper by buying a whole car and then stripping everything out and then selling the bits I didn't want, but that's just grief and don't really have anywhere to store the other bits. But yeah, £2,000, that was all paid for thanks to the finding that we had on the vehicle at the bug bash. So here again are the pictures of the ABS sensor simulator and the head unit in a box. Here is a picture of my car in a box. As you can see, most of the control parts on the right hand side. So you've got the steering switches, your dashboard switches, your ignition key, instrument cluster. There's also the washer bottle attached there. Message me afterwards, I'll tell you the story about that one. On the left hand side, you've got all the engine components. So the engine ECU, RG stim on the left there. You've got variable resistor for the water temperature, the O2 simulator at the top, the pedals, throttle body, etc. There's also a board that allows you to see what lights are going on. Under that board are the very large resistors for the indicators, so you can they flash correctly, so they don't flash fast. So that is it in its exposed form, shall we say. So here's a little video of my car in a box. So that's RG-Stim varying the rev counter. And it's currently doing about 2,000-ish RPM. And now I'm going to turn on the ABS simulator and vary the speed. You can hear the motor going. It's currently doing more than 100, 143 mile an hour. I'd like to see you do 143 mile an hour in a Peugeot 208. It'd probably shake yourself to bits. There you go, it's gone back down to nothing. That is just an example of what you can do. You can also do can injection and make those things do it yourself. So here is a little thing I produced when I first started the car hacking village in the UK. It's a nano can adapter. I give out these PCBs as my business card. This is last year's one, so 2019. Still got a load left. Anyone wants one, message me afterwards. I will send it to you if you cover the postage. What this allows you to do is build a CAN bus adapter for probably less than $5. It uses a cheap Arduino Nano from China, which is a couple of dollars, and a MCP2515 CAN controller module. Again, another couple of dollars from China. It's easier if you buy the components yourself, because getting one through customs is quite easy. Getting a box of 50 through customs is slightly harder. I get them charged for import tax, etc. This, in its default form, if you load the receive all sketch shown here, you can use with the Arduino IDE on the serial console and see all the messages going through the CAN bus. Here is the same messages going through PuTTY. Just use it as a 500K serial port. The GitHub repository is there. There are some other ones for other microcontrollers as well, Teensy, the SP32. But if anyone does want one, give me a shout. Here is another video of what I call disco mode. One of my little CAN adapters is programmed to randomly generate messages for the light switch module, which then basically cause it to go into an epileptic fit and do the flashy lights for you. It's quite interesting. A friend of mine has a Peugeot 208, and we were going to put it in his car so that when he got to a certain speed, the lights would go mental and he'd get worried, but he wouldn't let us. So yeah, swell sport. So it's amazing what you can do by just injecting messages, but don't play with your own car unless you know what you're doing. That is why I have the car in the box. That is why I bring it to conferences, because if you break this, it's not going to kill someone. I can just replace one part. It might cost me a small amount of money, but not excessive amount of money. But that is me done. I'd like to say thank you, A, to the Grim Cyber team for their inspiration and their help in building it. B, to the Car Hacking Village team, all mentioned there, for their support in building what is now Car Hacking Village UK and the wider Car Hacking Village brand around the world. Also, thank you to Noham Sek for inviting me here to this cktivitycon, and HackerOne team for the conference and for the trip to the Auto Isaac last year. If there are any questions, please hit me up on the Discord channel afterwards. That is me done.